Good morning, students. Today we will going to study business communication. What is communication? Communication is defined as the giving, receiving or exchanging of information, opinions or ideas so that the message is completely understood by everybody involved. It is a two-way process also. Communication comprises the following elements are the sender, message, channel, receiver, feedback and context. Now, the definition of communication. According to Knudsen and O'Donnell, communication is an intercourse by words, letters, symbols or messages, and it is a way that one organization member shares meaning and understanding with another. Now, nature of communication. Number 1, consistency. Second, exchanges. Third, two-way process, verbal and non-verbal, dynamic cycle, unavoidable, pervasive. Two individuals, binding together organizational activities, mutual understanding, objective driven. Now come to the point. Types of communication. Here 10 types of communication, that is formal communication, informal communication, downward communication, upward communication, horizontal communication, diagonal communication, non-verbal communication, verbal communication, oral communication and written communication. Under this, we are going to study types of communication according to organizational structure. According to organizational structure, there are two types of communication. One is formal and second is informal communication. So what is formal communication? It is a flow of information through formally established channels in an organization. It may be oral or written. It is mostly controlled by the managers in an organization. It is hierarchical in nature and associated with superior and subordinate relationship, generally linked with formal status and positions of a person. It may be upward, downward and horizontal. Now, second, informal communication. Informal communication refers to communication on the basis of personal relations. It is a type of communication which is unstructured, unofficial and unplanned. It does not follow the formal channels established by the management. It often flows between friends and intimates and related to personal rather than positional matters. Informal, we see positional communication, okay, and here there is a communication of personal, like friends, relatives, like this. It cannot be demonstrated on the chart and not regulated by formal rules and procedure. The informal communication system is built around the social relationship of the members of the organization. Now, here's an example of informal communication, that is grapevine communication. Informal communication is also referred as grapevine communication. Grapevine communication carries unofficial information. It is not a reliable source of communication. Managers should be very careful about such communication. Then on the basis of direction, there are 4 types of direction communication, like 1, downward communication, second, upward communication, third, horizontal communication, fourth, diagonal communication. What is downward communication? Communication that takes place from superior to subordinate in a chain of command is known as downward communication. Such type of communication may be in the form of orders, instructions, policies, programs, etc. It may be written or verbal. The following messages are induced in this type of communication, like confirmation regarding performance, work assignments and directions, orders, guidance, and responsibilities, ideological type of information, organization procedure and practices. Then upward communication. When messages are transmitted from bottom to top of the organizational hierarchy, it is known as upward communication. When our message transmitted from the bottom, that means from the lower level of manager to the top level of the organizational hierarchy, that is upward communication. The main function of upward communication is to supply information to the top management in an organization. It is essentially participative in nature and can be flourished only in a democratic organizational environment. It may be in the form of progress report, suggestions, grievances, complaints, etc. Now, horizontal communication. When communication takes place between two or more persons who are working at same level, it is known as horizontal communication. This type of communication takes place mostly during a committee meeting or conferences. The main object of such communication is to establish interdepartmental coordination. Then, diagonal communication. Diagonal communication is an exchange of information between persons at different levels across departmental lines. This type of communication is used to spread information at different levels of an organization to improve understanding and coordination so as to achieve organizational objective. Then, on the basis of mode of expression. Number 1, non-verbal communication. Second, verbal communication. Now come to the point, what is non-verbal communication? Communication through expressions, gestures or posture is non-verbal communication. It refers to the flow of information through facial expressions, tone of voice and other body movements. In other words, we can say it is a type of communication other than words, in which we are not using any word, we just only using our expressions and gestures, our body language. It conveys the feelings, emotions, attitude of a person to another without saying a word. A person can communicate his feelings to others quickly and economically by using a non-verbal form of communication. And this also does not require the use of words, as a person can express his feelings by his body language too. Now, what is verbal communication? Verbal communication is an exchange of information by using words, either written or oral. Verbal communication consists of speaking, listening, writing, reading, etc. It is the most preferred mode of communication. It may be of two types, like oral communication and written communication. When a message is expressed through spoken words, it may be either through face-to-face conversation or with the help of electronic modes such as telephone or cellular phones, etc. It may also be in the form of informal communication, group discussions, meetings, etc. Then, written communication. What is written communication? When opinions are exchanged in written form rather than by spoken words, it is known as written communication. It may be expressed through charts, pictures and diagrams. It includes newspapers, reports, letters, circulars, magazines, etc. While using written communication, words should be selected very carefully because message once sent cannot be altered. It is formal in nature and cannot be overlooked. Then come to the next point. What are the types of communication barriers? First, we know the definition of communication barrier. What is communication barrier? Communication barrier is something that prevents us from correctly getting and accepting the message others use to communicate their information, thoughts and ideas. It is a barrier, interruption in the communication between two persons or more than two persons. Like some of the examples of communication barriers are information overload, choosy perceptions, workplace gossips, semantics, gender differences, etc. Okay. Now here comes the types of communication barrier. Psychological barriers. So what is psychological barrier? The psychological conditions of the receiver will power how the message is received. It totally depends on the receiver, how the receiver is receiving the message. Is it exactly the message sent by the sender, what the receiver receives, or something else? Like example, stress management. It is a significant personal skill that affects our interpersonal relationships. For example, anger is a psychological barrier to communication. When we are angry, it is simply to say things that we may afterwards regret, and also to misunderstand that what others are saying. Okay. Now, physical communication barrier. Communication is usually easier over shorter distances as more communication channels are obtainable and less technology is obligatory. Although modern technology often serves to decrease the crash of physical barrier, the advantages and disadvantages of each communication channel should be unspoken so that a suitable channel can be used to overcome the physical barriers. Now comes physiological barriers. What is physiological barrier? It may affect the receiver physical conditions. For example, a receiver with condensed hearing may not grab the sum of a spoken conversation, especially if there is a significant surrounding noise. Then, language barrier. Language and linguistic aptitude may act as a barrier to communication. However, even when communicating in a similar language, the terms used in a message may act as a barrier if it is not easy to understand by the receiver. Then, attitudinal barrier. Attitudinal barrier are perceptions that stop people from communicating well. Attitudinal barrier to communication may affect from poor management, personality conflicts, and battle to change, or a lack of motivation. Active receivers of messages should challenge to overcome their attitudinal barrier to assist effective communication. Now, semantic barriers. Here you can see the diagram. First we should know the definition. What is semantic barrier? Semantic barrier refers to the misunderstanding between the sender and the receiver. It is a misunderstanding between the sender and the receiver, arising due to different meaning of words and other symbols used in the communication. Semantic barrier usually arises when the information is not in the simple language and contains those words or symbols that have multiple meanings. For example, bad expressions. Second, symbols or words with different meanings. Like here we have an example, a bird sanctuary is full of cranes. Second, the builder used a crane to lift heavy steel rods. Third, the girl has to crane her neck to watch the movie. Here a word crane, there has so many meanings. Full of cranes, the builder used a crane to lift heavy tools, the girl has to crane her neck to watch the movie. Okay, so there's a symbol of words with different meanings. One word has so many meanings. Next, faulty translation. Sometimes the sender translates a message as per his level of understanding, irrespective of the recipient's comprehension level. Okay. Then fourth, unclarified assumptions. Sometimes the sender creates assumptions about certain things which he feels the receiver must be knowing about it and focus only on the subject matter. Then Denotations and connotations. The denotation means the literal meaning of the word. It just shows the name of the object and does not imply any negative or positive qualities. The denotations barrier arises due to sender and receiver using different definition and meaning of the word used in the message. Whereas the implied meaning of the word is called connotations, that arouses personal reactions and qualitative judgments. The connotations barrier arise when the people use words that hold different meanings in different abstract situations, context, feelings, etc. Sixth, technical jargons. Often people working in a technical groups such as engineers, production managers, IT managers, etc. use the technical jargons in their communication, which is quite difficult for the layman to understand. Thus, the use of technical jargon in communication can act as a barrier. These are the types of semantic barriers. Now, come to the point, 10 principles of effective communication. What is the principle of communication? It is effectively is vital in the world of the market, whether it is email, blog post or client meetings. Good communication skills are a necessity. Understanding how to express yourself clearly and effectively is critical for any business. Here are 10 simple principles for remembering the effective communication. Number 1, create a goal. For effective communication, we have to create first our goal, a clear goal. The first step is determining how you want to impact your audience. Are you positioning yourself as a thought leader, or are you persuading them to take action? Figuring out your ideal outcome at the start and intentionally crafting your communication to reach for that goal will make it much more effective. Second, listening to the feedback. Good communication is never a one-way street. This is why no one enjoys being stuck with someone constantly talking about themselves without giving you a chance to respond or even say a few words. One-sided communication can make anyone lose interest in the topic at hand. We always have to listen the feedback. Third, adjust to your medium. Understanding the context of your communication is vital to success. For example, you wouldn't say certain things through written communication because the tone and inflection of the spoken word isn't there. On the other hand, you would communicate much differently on the phone than face to face because the other person can't see your face, hand gestures or body language. Once you decide on the most appealing format to reach your audience, make sure your content and messaging are both tailored for that medium. Then, fourth is stay organized. We always have to stay organized to our content. Staying organized isn't easy for most people. One way to stay organized is to create a high level outline before you attempt to communicate with your audience. Breaking things down into small tasks will help you remain focused on this plan while being methodical in your research and avoiding any scope creep. Fifth, be persuasive. One of the primary goals of effective communication is to remain persuasive. Of course, people are persuaded in different ways. Using relevant facts to back up your main argument is a way great to appeal to many people. However, it is even more important to appeal to your audience emotional side, as research shows that our emotional brain processes information much faster than the logical side of our brain. Sixth, be clear. Writing concise sentences is essential to keeping things clear. On the other hand, writing large blocks of text with lengthy sentences is one of the quickest ways to lose the attention of your audience. Seventh, visuals are important. Variety can often go a long way while communicating with an audience. People can comprehend new information in numerous ways. but the vast majority are primarily visual people. In fact, people can understand visual data in as little as 13 milliseconds. Okay, understanding how to use compelling visuals is a great way to draw in your audience. Use stories. We can use as stories. Another way to connect with your audience and communicate your ideas is with powerful stories. People are natural storyteller and listeners. This inborn trait stretches across cultures and is especially evident with how kids are so quickly drawn into storybooks. Less is more. Yes, always. Less is more. Your audience is likely busy, so don't waste your or their time with irrelevant habits, repeated information, or details that don't help you with your main communication goal. It will lead to disengagement, less information being retained, and take away from the effectiveness of your efforts when in doubt on the side of clarity. Be curious. Always be curious. Finally, resolve to always be learning. While some things remain the same, the world of communication is constantly evolving. Continue to read, talk to mentors, and never assume you know everything when it comes to good communication. What is organizational barrier? Organizational barrier refers to hindrances in the flow of information among the employees that might result in a commercial failure of an organization. Here, some organizational barriers are listed below. As you can see the diagram. Number 1, organizational rules and policies. Second, status or hierarchical positions in the organization. Third, organizational facilities. Fourth, complex organizational structures. These are the whole organizational barriers. Then come to the point, one-way and two-way communication. What is one-way and two-way communication? One-way communication is where there is no facility or expectations of reply or feedback. An advertisement or notice on a board is an example. Its advantages are that it is simple, quick and cheap, and it allows no clarification or opportunity to correct inaccuracies, and this may cause frustration in the receiver also. Then two-way communication. Two-way communication is more time consuming because the receiver has the opportunity to feedback and to question what has been said or written. The receiver is invited to contribute to the process, so this kind of communication is often associated with democratic forms of leadership. If the message is complex, two-way communication is far more effective and probably accurate than two-way communication. So, thank you students.